Stay tuned after the episode to hear our latest edition of And Then What?
Skylar, dude, I haven't seen you in a hot second. It's good to see you. Happy New Year's.
Yeah, it's good to be back in Seattle for a brief moment, and Happy New Year's to you too.
It is a brief moment. As is the tradition, we do a show about turning ideas into realities for New Year's. And Skylar, I don't really remember very many emails I get. I mean, they sort of blur together, right? But you sent me one of the most interesting emails I got in all of 2025. Can you pull it up and read it for us?
Yeah, so I think I titled it Little Life Update, which may have been a bit of an understatement. And at the time, I was living down in the Southwest for a brief moment, and I didn't really know what was coming next. This email was the marker of what would be coming next. So I got an offer to basically go live in this cabin in the backcountry in Montana. At first, I thought it was a scam because it seemed too good to be true. And then once I actually talked to him and realized it was real, I asked if I could think about it over the weekend. And by the next day, I texted him back and I was like, hey, yeah, this is kind of a no-brainer. Like, yeah, I'm in. Then shortly after that, I sent you this email detailing how in January and February of 2026, I would be spending my time out in this cabin in the backcountry in the mountains of Montana, taking care of the place and having incredible access to backcountry skiing and snowboarding for the whole time. Needless to say, I was pretty psyched.
Yeah, and Becca and I thought it was awesome. I mean, it doesn't mean you're leaving the Dirtbag Diaries or Duct Tape the Beer. You're just like, they have Starlink, which is just kind of like a wild thing. But I got to say this, like, it's remote. This kind of experience, it's not necessarily for everyone. There are elements of The Shining to this place. I'm curious, like, are you nervous at all? Because I've always appreciated how you approach your big adventures. You're real calm. There's like no big fuss. And does this one feel at all different?
You might have been the first one to mention The Shining when I started telling people about this, but there were many.
But I was not the last.
Many that followed you, which I haven't read or seen The Shining, so I'm not too pressed about that.
Maybe avoid it before you go.
I'll read it after the fact. But typically when I approach my adventures, especially the bigger ones, it kind of just becomes all about making the lists, failing to check them off, but going very much just into getting the operations done. Like what needs to be laid out, what needs to be packed, what are the logistics, and just very unemotionally taking care of that. But this time, I had a little bit of time to think about it before I dove into all that. And I realized that I don't take the time to appreciate the anticipation leading in to an experience like this. And so I resolved that at that time to do my best to just soak in that excitement and those nerves for what I was going to experience and let my mind wander and imagine, how cool this thing could be. And naturally, on the flip side of that, it's also imagining like, oh, what happens when the Starlink gets knocked out and a huge storm rolls in and I lose power and all of these things, which are a little bit nerve-wracking. But I really just wanted to appreciate this experience in whole from beginning to end. And that started with that anticipation.
Do you think there's something you're hoping to find out there with being on your own? And, there's like people coming and going, but, there's a lot of downtime. Like, do you think there's something you're kind of like, maybe this experience will give me this thing?
Yeah, I think that a lot of half-baked ideas on that have floated through my mind. I've kind of dreamt up this idea of a retreat of sorts. And the reality of the situation is that it's not going to be all that different than my normal life since I am going to have internet. But I do really plan to take the time to appreciate the space that I'm in and utilize this shift to hopefully take a bit more time with myself and with the incredible environment that I'm going to be in. And hopefully I can bring some of that back with me when the end of the 2 months comes around.
I think what I hear you saying is you're sort of conjuring up this experience, and it may not end up being like what you think it's going to be or how you anticipate it to it, but there's something special when you kind of bring together your ideas, bring together your efforts. Sometimes you do it with friends, right? Sometimes you do it with the community at large, but you gather resources and you make something that can be really special. And sometimes that can be a lasting legacy that benefits generations to come.
Two independent minds, Ricky Gates and Andy Cochran, unbeknownst to each other, they realized something was missing from the world of trail running. Both of them set off to make their dreams a reality. And through their endeavors and the Trail Running Underground, they learned of each other's efforts. They found helping hands and ultimately closed in on building a roadmap for the next generation of the sport.
Their work is an homage to the past, a detailed recognition of the present, and the groundwork for a deeply considerate future for the sport of trail running. 50 Classics started all with climbing 50 Classics of North America. There was 50 Classics Ski Descents of North America. These books have had a huge impact on our communities. And Ricky and Andy, they set out to create the same thing for trail running. We discussed their future defining text as they closed in their final choices for 50 Classic Trails of America. I'm Fitzko Hall.
I'm Skylar Perwins.
You're listening to the Dirtbag Diaries.
I was running at Smith Rock, fairly familiar with both of the 50 Classic Climbs book and 50 Classic Ski Descents. And I just said to my friend who I was running with, like, oh man, 50 Classic Runs, it's got to exist, right? And we laughed about it. And I was just like, I'll just Google it when I get home and buy it. I would love to have that book. Sounds great. We kept going on the run, got home. Didn't exist. Couldn't find anyone working on a book like that. So I kind of felt like, well, I guess I'll do it.
Now you might be thinking, get a load of this guy. He thinks he can come out and literally write the book on trail running and then sit on the shelf with the heavyweights of adventure sports. What gall. But for those who know Andy Cochran, it's simply another exceptional project in an exceptional portfolio that seems to stem from a somewhat extraordinary upbringing.
I am the son of two park rangers. I call it being a park rat when you're in national parks and outdoors a lot. And, when you're a kid, you don't have much relativity. So I thought that was pretty normal. So yeah, I had a super special and unique childhood. I'm super grateful for my parents for letting me and my sisters run around outside a lot. And I think that was super formative for me without knowing it at the time.
And if you looked at the trajectory of Andy's life, it would indeed seem shaped by an upbringing that was spent primarily in the outdoors. 5 years living in a Toyota Tacoma dubbed Taco Mama, journeys across nearly every continent, many of which he documented with photos and videos and prose that could make the coziest homebody yearn for the wilds, as well as an athletic repertoire, including expertise in backcountry skiing, rock climbing, bike packing, backpacking, scuba diving, and more. Out of all of this, though, he found trail running wonderfully satisfied the minimalist ethos that his parents imparted in him.
Trail running has unlocked this very special world where I get to explore and connect with landscapes across pretty large swaths of terrain, 40, 50, 60 miles in a day, through just moving my body through it. And that's my single favorite way to be in the mountains.
And so, after that fateful trail run at Smith, Andy put his years of writing and creative experience in gear, and he got to work.
Reached out to a bunch of friends. That's my personality. I like to do things as a group, and mostly writers and photographers who also were avid runners who I thought could help create it, and kind of said like, hey, I have this idea. Would you want to join forces and be part of it? Just knowing it's a huge lift to do that travel and research and writing about all of them.
Andy had reached out to like so many people all over the country to try to do like a more crowdsourced version of this book project. And I stuck around, and then one other friend kind of stuck around.
Ian McClellan, professional photographer and videographer, trail runner, and potentially the longest running practitioner of an unofficial photo a day practice. He's somewhere past day 4,000 now, and also named the most likely to climb Everest in Birkenstocks by his high school class.
I went to like a pretty like serious school, and I was the more like crunchy granola kid who just wanted to like be barefoot in the grass, hang out, hang out and be outside as much as possible. I was like a okay high school cross country runner. The only part of cross country I was actually good at was hill sprints. Like I loved hill sprints so much. And I could crush those and crush long runs. Running has always been part of my life. I've stuck with it. And it's just a consistent thing day in and day out, whatever the season, wherever I am, wherever I travel. Like running is like a thread that connects everything.
Running is the thread that connected Ian and Andy as well. They met years ago near Lake Tahoe while working on a trail running documentary together.
Andy, from the first moment I met him, I was like, oh, this guy can rip. Like whatever it is, like he's going so hard. You know, after 2 days of no sleep filming this documentary on the Tahoe Rim Trail, he just was like running. He was just going. I've never hung out with him in like a non-mountain setting, I think. I was obviously very excited when he emailed. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do a part of this book. I'll do a very small part of this book. Like I'll show up, I'll do 5 or 6 trails, flash forward, and we're all like running 20 of these trails.
Running 20 trails dispersed across the U.S. is a pretty big undertaking in and of itself. So how did they end up here, each taking on such a large portion of the project? Well, for one, Andy's crowdsourcing didn't quite turn out huge numbers of folks who were willing and able to sacrifice weeks of free time to travel around the U.S. and run in an attempt to ascertain whether these trails qualified as classics or not. But his efforts were not totally in vain. He got Ian on board, obviously, and one of those other folks that Andy reached out to, they gave him a big heads up. Someone else was already chasing this same project. Ricky Gates.
Andy and I were kind of like, uh-oh, should we like compete with Ricky Gates? Which is, you know, we would lose.
A maniacal glint seems etched into Ricky Gates' presence, some sort of aura rather than an actual expression. He has an impressive history in the competitive ultramountain trail racing world and has placed in the top 10 of more than 10 major ultras. But these days, he sees himself more fittingly as a conceptual runner. I'll let Ricky explain what that means.
A good friend of mine in San Francisco, he came up with that title. He's an artist and amidst the world of conceptual art, and kind of saw what I was doing with the sport of running as kind of similar, just kind of blending the boundaries of athleticism and storytelling and art form. He gave that title to me, and I appreciate it more than other titles that I could fall under.
Ricky develops projects that are a rich blend of art and athletics. He ran across America to explore the reality of political division and made a film about it. He's an every single streeter, having planted his worn shoe prints on every street in San Francisco. And if you don't know what that is, you should give our episode, The Perfect Pace with Ricky, a listen. He's also put together community-centered projects with the wondrous titles of Skimo Bueno, Hut Run Hut, and Bus Run Bus. And to Ricky, the goal to put together 50 classic trails, it's been a long time coming.
To paint the full picture, like rewinding to like my early mid-20s is important to living in Boulder, Colorado. I was certainly a runner then, but I was also doing a lot of rock climbing. A couple of my friends in that community mentioned this book called The 50 Classic Climbs of North America. A lot of it similarly sort of crowdsourced, certainly the photos of it. But just kind of started thinking back then, like, you know, being that running was my main sport, my main interest, what would a similar sort of list look like in the sport of running? So the wheels just started kind of turning. I always envisioned it as a solo project. I've done all of my other projects just on my own. And it's sort of one of those things like I know I can count on myself. I don't know if I can count on other people.
So, Andy and Ian's crowdsourced, community-centric approach to the classics is on track to crash into ultra-running ultra-legend Ricky Gates' solo attempt.
Like, this is a little bit of a coming to Jesus moment of like, it's either going to be a race to the end, and I don't want that, but like, I also didn't want to make assumptions. Ricky is pretty well known in the industry. He's got one of the best reputations. Like, I was like, I think I'm going to like this guy, but like, you don't know, maybe you have different perceptions of what you want the book to be.
After the break, Andy, Ian, and Ricky, they see if they can align their vision for what the 50 Classics might be.
We have a Doug fir tree out in our front yard. The kids used to be taller than it. It was like a little Charlie Brown Christmas tree that was so perfect. But as they've grown, the tree has outpaced them. It's a nice reminder of the scale that Mother Nature works at. And it made me appreciate all the trees around me. They sure make the world a better place. That's why Oboz Footwear has been committed to planting trees. As a certified B Corp, Oboz cares about their impact on the planet and invests in a number of initiatives that aim to restore the natural environment. They just hit a major milestone. Since 2007, they've helped plant over 7 million trees. 7 million. That's a lot. You might even be able to see some of those trees in Oregon, where Douglas fir trees are planted to restore areas affected by wildfire. Thanks, Oboz, for supporting the show, but more importantly, thanks for planting trees. We appreciate it. To learn more about Oboz, check out obozfootwear.com/lovehiking. And support comes from Kuat Racks. When the temperature drops and the sky starts dropping those fluffy flakes, it's time to throw the grip on the car. Because that first pow day, it happened yesterday. The slide-out tray makes loading and unloading easy, so it's easier to get your stuff on top of the car. It's kind of a pain in the ass to do in ski boots, but this makes it easy. And with 2 sizes holding up to 6 sets of skis or 4 snowboards, the grip makes heading to the mountain a party. Life's always better with friends, right? And like all of the products, the grip ski and snowboarding racks are covered by the No Worries limited warranty. So whether you're on the road or the mountain, we've got your rack and your back. Kuat, because you love your gear. All right, here we go. Yep, I just signed up for a trail marathon in late March. That will get me moving through the dark, rainy, cold Seattle winter. There will be mud, there will be puddles. So it's also time for some new Darn Tough running socks. For over 40 years, Darn Tough has been making socks in Vermont with yarn sourced from America and around the world. They pride themselves on using merino wool, which is super comfortable, to create a durable sock. And they back it up with an unconditional guarantee for life. If these aren't the longest lasting socks you've ever owned, return them for another pair. Things I like. Dude, they're comfortable. They have a variety of styles to choose from. There's quarter, crew, no show. There's different cushioning patterns. So if I want something super light for a race, I choose. And they're just nice merino wool socks that take care of my feet. So it's a new year, it's a new race, same me, but new socks. Darn Tough is offering free shipping on any order to Diaries listeners. Use the code DIRTBAG at checkout. We'll put a link in the show notes or visit darntough.com to find your new favorite pair of socks. Your feet deserve it. Thanks to Darn Tough for supporting the show. So if you know me, you know I'm not one for resolutions, but I like setting goals. I see a difference in those two things. So every year I think I want to spend time with friends on skin tracks as snow falls. I want to run as many miles as I can on trail, bike pack in places I haven't been before, climb with my kids, do all these things. And sometimes in my hectic world, that means I end up missing out on meals or trying to scrap calories from a gas station, which is not ideal. I've got a little hack. Kachava's whole body meal shakes keep my body and mind nourished. With 2 scoops of Kachava, you get 85 plus superfoods, nutrients, and plant-based ingredients. So not only am I getting 25 grams of plant-based protein, I'm also getting adaptogens and supergreens at the same time. Kachava has simplified my approach to nutrition. Instead of eating things I don't really like on the run, I rely on Kachava to power me up. Rewild your nutrition at Kachava.com and use the code DIARIES. New customers get $20 off an order of 2 or more bags now through the 31st of January. That's Kachava, Kachava.com, code DIARIES.
There can't really be 2 books detailing the 50 classic trails. Ricky, Andy, and Ian agreed to hop on a call in order to suss each other out. All expressed some degree of trepidation. They all had good reputations and a mutual respect, but neither had any idea if their goals in this pursuit could align.
I remember just coming off that and telling my partner, like, holy shit, this is awesome. I'm so excited about this.
After initial conversation, we're going back a year and a half now. We compared notes and saw that so many of our trails overlapped, so much of our ethos overlapped, and kind of like what we wanted to produce in the end overlapped. And I think just a quick vibe check with each other and personalities recognized that this is going to be a good partnership.
It just felt like a good fit. We were very similar progress, very, very similar heuristics of how we were picking trails, some discrepancies, but like you almost want that for good discourse in the group. And it just was like the energy felt right away. It was an easy decision once we talked to be like, let's team up.
I remember specifically saying like, I didn't want to work with anybody on this project, but here we are.
Yeah.
The closing of that Zoom window kind of opened a new chapter of sorts for the world of trail running. Andy, Ian, and Ricky would all band together to define the 50 classic trails of North America, 3 minds and 6 feet to explore thousands of miles of trail across some of the nation's most incredible terrain, and their goal was clear.
The main goal with these 50 trails is to pull together 50 unique experiences around the United States that help paint a complete ecological picture of what this country has to offer.
We wanted to set the holy grail of aspirational trails, to have these big dreams for people.
But first, they needed to pin down what makes these trails what they are, what makes a classic.
It feels like a trail in this sense, like has to read a little bit like a story, beginning, middle, and end, like a crescendo in there. It feels like a journey. It feels like a story. To me, that's what a classic feels like. It feels complete when you're done. You know, it fills you with anticipation when you start. What's this trail going to be like? What's this going to feel like? What's it going to look like?
Since a classic's status is determined by the experience one has while running it, the team needed to go out and run every single trail that was being considered. Between 3 people, that is a whole lot of running. So first, they set some ground rules to narrow down their selections.
The main parameters are, number 1, can the trail be done by a fit runner or hiker in 24 hours? It's kind of an arbitrary number, but it separates the John Muir Trail from this list of trails. It takes out the Appalachian Trail, the Arizona Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail.
For one of these trails, only Andy has done it in 24 hours. I don't know if Ricky and I could go out and run at least one of these trails. The wording of like, it's possible to be done in 24 hours is kind of like how we think about it. They're all hard and weird stuff could happen to anybody, but could somebody do it in 24 hours?
To add on to that, like I revisited the 50 classic climbs of North America this morning, and they were talking about how they were picking the climbs, and they had a list of 100 climbs. And invariably, younger climbing friends would suggest really, really hard 513 plus, multi-pitch, multi-day things. And then the older climbers were suggesting more like in the 5 to 6 pitch range, 5'8" to 5'10". It doesn't seem like a huge age spread between the 3 of us, but I'm the oldest. I'm 44 years old. Andy, you're 37. Ian's
35.
It doesn't seem like much, but I'd argue that these 10 years that I've got on these youngsters has me pushing more for the 30 to 40 mile range of runs. So this is just one of the ongoing discussions that we have amongst the 3 of us in what falls under that category of classics.
Number 2.
Would we try to convince a friend or a colleague to fly across the country to do this trail? It's a once in a lifetime thing. That's kind of the pressure test right there for a lot of these trails.
And number 3.
Can all of our 50 trails help paint a complete picture of the United States ecosystem? So we've got desert, mountain, coast. We've got sky islands. We've got swampland. The upper Midwest has some really amazing terrain.
There's so many different ecologies and geologies around the US that like one of our goals wasn't just to pick the 50 most aesthetic trails, but was to use this as an opportunity to show people how diverse the ecology and geology of the US, but doing that through trail running. So we put a priority on digging up trails in different places and not just picking, the 50 prettiest or 50 most famous, but quite a few that people may not know about or have loosely heard about. They're in places that aren't common trail running areas, but are freaking epic trails that help highlight that region and that area and that ecology.
That ecology, it became a more active participant in the selection process than the three initially imagined. Here's Ian.
Back in January of this year, I was sitting down with my wife on Google Maps and showing her on the Backbone Trail, which is outside of Los Angeles, where she was going to come and drop water and where she should meet me at the next point and how we should drive. And I was putting in the Google Maps directions, and it should have been like 40 minutes, and it was like 4 hours. And that's when I realized that the wildfires were happening outside of LA and that this trail will never be the same. The Backbone Trail will never be the same and might never be a complete trail in the way it once was. No one's immune to it.
Here, too, are parallels between the 50 classics. Joffre Peak, one of the 50 classic ski descents, it's been deemed no longer skiable due to a changing climate, while the Cassin Ridge on Denali, which is a classic climb, grows increasingly hazardous for the same reason. With their 3 parameters set, they began to look at which trails to include. But as they dug in, it got complicated. The second one, would they convince a friend or colleague to fly across the country to run these trails? It presented its own type of issue. You see, premising this heavily on an individual's experience lacked the depth that they desired, and the team wanted to root the book in a broader understanding of the land and a runner's place in it.
What it comes down to for this book is like, we look at everything, but it's not all relevant to every trail. We've really fleshed out, like trying to come up with like what the identity of that trail is and like putting that identity into context of what the last, 250 years of American history and then the usually 9,000 to 11,000 years of Native history. It's so different for each trail. So I think like we look at everything. We look at the political situations that sort of like allowed this land to be protected.
Some of this historical context has an interesting interplay with their goal of getting people out in nature in this current. One trail in northern Minnesota, which Andy ran recently, is sort of the epitome of this.
The Kekakabik, which goes across the Boundary Waters. The Boundary Waters was instrumental in the formation of the Wilderness Act of 1965. The major thought leaders of the conservation movement then, and really conservation period, were in that area and helped push that act through federally and protect that place as well as a few others that were the original capital W wilderness areas. And I mean, a lot of them have ties to the CCC in the Great Depression. A lot of them have ties to the Forest Service or National Park Service. Knowing that we had the foresight to think about how important it was that other people could get that same experience that they had when there was no infrastructure gives so much more value to that day.
And beyond that, as Ian said, they didn't stop with the relatively very recent U.S. history when considering the story of how these trails would come together in the book.
Almost all of them have indigenous ties as trade routes or hunting routes. So we go as far as we can in that research. It's harder with indigenous history in certain places because a lot of it was oral and not written, and that's hard to dig up, but we do our best to do a deep dive on the place.
I feel like I should be able to give a TED Talk on every single one of these trails that I'm running. And that TED Talk would involve telling the history of the trail, the geological history, the human history, why that trail is there in the first place, why is there a community nearby, doing all of this research has been way more enriching to me than I ever could have known.
There's one in Eastern Oregon. It's one of my favorites. It's one of the hidden gems of the book, I feel. And it has indigenous history that goes back well more than 10,000 years that we know about. So we can touch on the early people that were hunter-gatherers there. What was their lifestyle like, as far as we know? Then go through their history of getting horses, which changed who they were, then being forcibly removed and how horrible that was. And talk about like a longer span of history in that place. And to me, that's like so much more powerful when you understand that you were just this tiny speck, both in the sense of time, but also in the sense of geography. To me, that adds a lot of value to each trail.
Talking about the geology with every trail in depth, it's not really interesting. For some trails, like the rim to rim to rim, the geology is so important. Or I was just writing about the Enchantment Lakes Traverse. And there, like, you're on rock and you're surrounded by epic cliffs and lakes. And so the geology plays like a very big role. For some of the other trails, like in the Black Hills of South Dakota, there's the like recent political history is more important than the geologic history in a lot of ways. And looking at how the US government has illegally taken land and what sort of the modern context of like being a white person on a trail in a certain place is. And that's totally different for every trail. I think for each trail, we think big and then we try to like distill it down to like what's the most important essence of that trail.
As they dove deeper into shaping the book, they felt the weight of this process. They felt a responsibility to do things right by their community, and this raised some sticky questions.
One of the parts of this book that like I really want to try to figure out how to write about is like, what should you do as a trail runner? What's your responsibility when you're in a crowded area or if you're in a wilderness area to like be a good representation of other trail runners and to just be like a nice person? I'm still haven't figured out what the perfect thing to say is when you have to like pass 100 people in Acadia on like the most crowded trail. Yeah, that's one of those things I really want to like dig into. I don't know. There's a lot of weird stuff to think about.
They knew that their individual opinions would shape the answers to these sorts of questions, just like their individual experiences on the trails would shape what got selected for the book. And they had lengthy debates about it all. They reasoned that 3 perspectives were better than 1, and oftentimes, too, they would bring members of the broader community into the project.
One part of the project that's been really fun is reaching out to people, either like old friends or just someone who has the FKT of a trail, and being like, hey, do you want to like show up and like go run 50 miles with me on this random weekday? And like stop a lot and take pictures and eat good snacks and like hang out and try to experience the trail. There's a trail outside of Louisville, Kentucky, where I reached out to both the man and the woman who had the FKT. They showed up into the first half of the trail with me. And it was like they had never met each other, but we all like showed up in the dark in like a cold spring day and did this trail together and just like got to hang out for 5 or 6 hours. And I think that was like the big surprise. Cause like I knew that it was going to be beautiful. I knew I was going to like have a lot of fun running and, you know, jumping in lakes and rivers and all that part. But like, I think I underestimated just how important the other people I would run with would be. A lot of my friends that I've gone and run with for this book, like the trail was like the longest they've ever run, or like it was the hardest thing they've ever done. Or they're like, I don't know, they've kind of like opened up things, and they're usually not after the run saying, I'm never doing that again. Like how I usually feel after a road marathon. They're like, ooh, what should we do next? Like, what other trail would you recommend?
Their experiences weren't just shaped by the people they invited on the run, but also the ones that they would run into.
Different people that you get to come across on a trail like that, to be able to spend even just a passing moment with a thru hiker or someone that's doing a lifetime achievement of the John Muir Trail. Those all kind of like tie into that story that you experienced for that day. I have to say, I've been offered coffee like 3 or 4 times during this project out in the middle of the woods by campers, and I haven't taken any of them up on it yet. And I think I really hope that I have another opportunity for a mid-run cup of coffee. Yeah, I don't want to turn down that generosity anymore.
I regret that one in Ray Lakes. We should have taken that one.
Yeah.
I know you were thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, I may have finished the run with you.
I don't know. You're pretty at peace. I think it's 42 miles and 8,000 feet. And we get over this unbelievable pass and come down to the backside. And then we just kind of run out this river. And Ricky was like, I think I'm going to take a nap and just like soak in this moment. And in that moment, I was like, are you crazy? Like, what? But the more I've reflected on it, that's emblematic of this whole project. Like, I think as distinct as I can possibly be. I mean, I love running. These guys do too, especially in the mountains or far away from other people. And I would just call these like we could rename this book like Your 50 Best Days. They tell the story. They each touch some history or interesting ecology, but they're just like almost all day I'm on like riding a high and like a high. And you just want to like savor that. You want to just like soak it in. And I mean, I think they're pretty hard to forget, but yeah, Ricky was just taking that nap to just like really just soak in the Sierra a little bit longer. He's a wiser man than I am. The list of 50 is until we're done will be evolving, and definitely has evolved as we've gone through the process trying to fit all those criteria, especially at the very end. We're debating these final few trails, and this is really pressure tested, like which ones fit, which ones are good, and which ones are great.
Well, the book itself won't come out until spring of 2027. Andy, Ian, and Ricky have run nearly all the candidate trails. And with the end very quickly coming into sight, I asked each of them how it felt to reflect on the work that they've done.
There was a feeling of like bittersweet. That I've taken on other projects before that I'm just really excited to finish up and put my shoes up. And that wasn't the case with this one. Every single one of these trails that we've run has just been like pure joy. And it's been super fun to see what my body's been capable of in terms of, being now in my mid 40s and being able to put together these 30 and 40 mile runs pretty regularly throughout the summer and throughout the year. And to not have that huge goal to work towards, in a way, bittersweet, but in another way, just kind of looking forward to seeing how the project continues to grow, not just for us, but for others beyond us when we can get it out into the public.
I feel like in the best sense, I hope that this book is a roadmap of like another way that you can think about running, and hopefully another way that running could fit into your life. It's
almost like another outlet. There's so many people that race, and that's awesome that it's growing, but this, adventure running, maybe this is like a jumping off point for people. My thought is it is an escape from reality, but maybe more importantly, it's a reminder of like the stuff you want to bring back. Like almost every trail I'll run, I'll be like, do you want to process why it felt so good? And it's like, yeah, it was an escape from reality, but do I want that to be my reality? And it's a reminder of like these things I care about and the important things in life, really, connection with people and those quiet moments outside of like, oh, how can I have a little bit more of that back home? So that's to me the most important part. It's not the actual escape, but it's the reminder that I try to like incorporate in my daily life.
Early on, I was like, oh, I have to go to North Carolina and run the Art Loeb Trail. And now it's like, I get to. Like, I feel like I just like reframed it all. Once it became, I feel like it was once the project became something that was like achievable. It didn't feel like this kind of like obscure goal way off in the distance. I feel like once the goal felt achievable, it totally changed in my mind where I'm like, oh, I get to go do this. Like, I'm going to go on a Tuesday to like the coolest place in my state and like just go experience it with like a friend. That's so cool. Like, I get to do that. And it's going to be hard and whatever. I get to do it. So it's like a very subtle shift, like have to versus get to. But that's the thing that's going to stick with me, hopefully, for the rest of my life.
I think we're starting to feel the feelings that come with finishing something this big. All three of us feel really proud. We worked really hard on it. I'm almost glad I didn't know how hard it was because it's been a 3-year grind. And so to get this far, and we still have work to do, but to feel close. I feel really proud of like what I've done, what those two guys have done, how we've learned from each other and challenge each other. Like we get into real arguments, and it's a sign of trust and respect when you can do that with a person. I get to call myself an author, and I'm really proud of that. And doing that with two people who I didn't know that well before, and now I call them really good friends. So yeah, those friendships I'm really thankful for. And joining the pantheon of amazing writers who put in the years of hard work to become authors is like, I don't know, you just feel like a small piece in this massive puzzle, and that it's like cool to be part of that, I don't know, that club, and know the work it takes to get there. And you're like, oh, okay, if I work hard enough, I can do that too.
Thanks, Andy, Ian, and Ricky for chatting with us. You can find more images from their efforts in search of the 50 Classics on Instagram at 50 Classic Trails or on their website, 50classictrails.com. The book itself is slated to be released in spring of 2027. And rumor has it there will be a pre-sale beforehand, so keep an eye out for updates from these three. Our stories come from friends of friends, and from you, our community. If you have a compelling idea for a guest or a story lead, please give us a shout. You can email us at editor@ducktapethenbeer.com. Thanks to the folks who have recently become Diaries Plus members. We really appreciate it in the new year. You're powering the show. You're making it accessible to the rest of this audience. Thank you. As always, if you want a way to help but you cannot afford Diaries Plus, write us a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps others find the show and keeps us at the top of the outdoor charts. Music today from Evan Phillips, Fields of Etheria, Joya, Lilac Canyon, David Swenson, and Brendan O'Connell. The tracks are courtesy of the artist or Track Club. Jacob Bain and Nis Cotto composed our theme song. You can find the artists at our website, dirtbagdiaries.com. This episode was produced by Skylar Perwins and edited by Evan Phillips. Illustration by Walker Cahal. Becca Cahal is our executive producer. I'm Fitz Cahal, and you've been listening to the Dirtbag Diaries. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to And Then What, the segment where we break down the headlines and figure out what the hell's happened since then. Hey everyone, Fitz here. Thanks for sticking around for another edition of Then What. 4 years ago in our Endangered Spaces series, we covered the struggle to save Oak Flat, Arizona. An oasis in the deserts north of Phoenix, this landscape is sacred to the San Carlos Apache and a place where they continue to perform religious ceremonies. It's also beloved by climbers. It once hosted the world's largest climbing competition. The creek that runs through it makes it an ecologically rich landscape cherished for its biodiversity and birding. Mining has existed there for more than 100 years, but the plan by Resolution Copper, a foreign-owned company, was next level. Drill down and then under Oak Flat before detonating explosives that would turn the landscape into a 2-mile-wide crater. The battle over Oak Flat has stretched out for over a decade with changing administrations and legal fights. Now we find ourselves at a moment where we may soon know the fate of Oak Flat. Today we are joined by Eric Murdoch, longtime climber and Deputy Director of Programs, Policy, and Government Affairs for the Access Fund. Eric, thanks for joining us today. The fight for Oak Flat, it's been going on for more than a decade now. Can you take us back to the beginning?
The beginning was really way back in the early 2000s when John McCain and Senator Flake started introducing bills in Congress. So we had a decade of bills where Congress had to consider whether to actually transfer this land. And no Congress for a decade would pass that bill. In other words, Republicans, Democrats decided that this was not a good idea. And this is a good example of how sort of our democratic process really works. It was not something that people wanted. So it was December of 2014 when McCain jammed it into the 2015 NDAA.
So just quickly to interrupt, the NDAA is the National Defense Authorization Act, which generally speaking gets passed every year, like as a bipartisan vote to fund the military. And so like, how did McCain get this wedged into this bill?
It was just sort of this deal between John McCain and Mitch McConnell, and they jammed this little provision in, and it said that the United States, upon completion of an environmental impact statement, would exchange this land with Resolution Copper, a foreign mining company. We were going to hand over Forest Service land, public land with incredible climbing, incredible ecosystems, and is really a sacred site where many ceremonies are done by the San Carlos Apache tribe. So it was a really unfortunate thing for a lot of stakeholders, and frankly, it was really unfortunate for the American public because it was a way to sort of get past democratic process the way it's supposed to work.
So the Access Fund has been part of the litigation to protect Oak Flat. Can you talk a bit about how you all got involved and why Oak Flat has been important to climbers?
Yeah, I think to the climbing community, the Phoenix Bouldering Contest was the largest bouldering contest in the world. And in the 1990s and even going into the 2000s, it was the place where if you were a professional climber, an aspiring climber, you wanted to be at this contest. But it also sort of was this incredible cultural moment for the climbing community. And I remember, get camping out and everyone's sleeping out at Oak Flat together, and you wake up in the morning and they're just blasting the Star Spangled Banner by Jimi Hendrix, just on, volume 11. And that's how this thing started. And then the San Carlos Apache would do some tribal ritual and get everyone pumped up. And between the Jimi Hendrix and the San Carlos Apache, it just had this incredible feel. And I think that, the Access Fund is really interested in protecting access for future generations, but we're also really interested in protecting America's climbing legacy. And Oak Flat is really important to America's climbing legacy.
Since then, there's been this long process. There's been lawsuits. Where are we at right now in terms of getting closer to a decision on Oak Flat?
So we're really lucky that the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee made sure to add that little nuance to the law that said, you got to do an environmental impact statement before the land exchange is fully executed, before the title is handed over to Resolution Copper, which of course is a mining company that has one of the major stakeholders is China. So since 2015, the Forest Service has been busy working on this environmental impact statement, and certain administrations like the past administration kind of did a little extra due diligence and asked the Bureau of Land Management to audit the EIS. And there's all these like gamesmanship going on. But the current administration, within a couple months of the beginning of this administration, they ordered the Forest Service to finalize the EIS. So that is the trigger for handing over the title. So in August, the day before it was supposed to be transferred, Access Fund and our other co-plaintiffs appealed the exchange, the transfer of the title, and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals agreed. They required an injunction to be applied to this issue. And now on January 7th, we're going to go into court. We're going to ask for the injunction to continue, to stop the transfer and to hear the case and to really consider what are the damages to the San Carlos Apache? What are the damages to the climbing community? What are the damages to the environment? And we think that if the court hears the case and considers the facts, that they will agree with us and not agree with Resolution Copper that the EIS is sufficient. In other words, our case hinges on the fact that this EIS is a sham.
There has been a community that's come together to try to protect Oak Flat. And what does that coalition building look like?
There's another lawsuit with the Apache Stronghold, which is a nonprofit that sort of represents the tribe. Now, their case is based on religious freedom. This is a land that was taken from the San Carlos Apache when the San Carlos Apache were herded to an Indian reservation. This is their homeland, but it's Forest Service land now. So their case is based on religious freedom. Our case is an APA case, a case that's based on the bureaucratic process of the environmental impact statement. You didn't do this form properly. You got to do it again. The problems with the environmental impact statement are multifold. It doesn't truly address the water issues. It doesn't address the appraisal. How much is this worth? How much money is the American public really giving away? There's a handful of folks who are teaming up with Access Fund together to file this lawsuit. But when I think about this issue, how egregious it is to take this land and potentially destroy it and to do serious harm to the environment, to the climbing community, to the San Carlos Apache, that the stakeholder group, that the co-plaintiff group would be bigger. that we would have more people joining in, and that the human-powered recreation community, as well as the American public, would really have much more of a problem with this. Remember, we're handing over billions, tens of billions of dollars of copper to another country. So that probably doesn't sit well with a lot of Americans.
So we're talking about copper mining here. I think it's like important to realize that we're not talking about people with pickaxes in a mine shaft right now. Talk to me about what the mining project that's been proposed looks like.
I lived in Arizona, 60 miles away from Oak Flat throughout the early 90s, mid 90s, and I was studying geology, and I became an exploration geologist for over a decade. And that was a place where I climbed and explored a lot. And there was mining with pickaxes and all of that going on for 100 years in that location. And the San Carlos Apache were able to do their ceremonies, this really interesting coming of age ceremony for girls, and climbers were wandering around and exploring the landscape, and folks were going out and doing bird watching, and it's got incredible riparian areas. And there was a lot of mining in the zone. And it was sort of standard mining where people would dig mining shafts and adits, and people were pulling copper out of the ground for many, many years. And I remember when I was climbing there and there was all this new drilling going on. They were doing all of this testing to figure out if there was a larger copper deposit deeper. And what was found is that there was a giant copper deposit even deeper. And the mining technology sort of caught up with this deposit. In other words, we can now mine ore, copper ore. Ore is as you know, is an economic term, right? Is it worth it to pull the shit out of the ground and sell it on the market? So the mining technology caught up, and it became clear that you could mine this very deep copper deposit. But the proposed mining technique, and it's not the only way to get this copper out of the ground, is something called block cave mining. And it involves drilling and digging way down deep beneath the surface and creating what would eventually be a crater that would collapse into itself. And that crater could be as wide as 2 miles wide and a mile deep, and it would basically destroy the area. So it's not that there hasn't been mining for many, many years, and it's not that there haven't been many stakeholders that have been sort of sharing this piece of real estate in a way that has been pretty successful. It's that this new mining technique would destroy the entire landscape. On top of that, we would be handing off a Forest Service land to Resolution Copper, which is owned by BHP and Rio Tinto. And like I said, the major stakeholder is China.
With the case going before the Ninth Circuit, is this kind of the last chance?
It's a good question. I think we're going to win the lawsuit. So I think the courts are going to block this land exchange in the first place. But, if we lose the case, we can appeal. At the same time, there's the Apache Stronghold case, which, of course, the Supreme Court decided not to hear, although some of the justices said that they should hear it. There's also an interesting new bill that was just introduced by Representative Adelita Grijalva, Raul Grijalva's daughter. But Raul Grijalva was introducing the Save Oak Flat Act for a decade, and Representative Grijalva, Adelita Grijalva, just introduced a bill actually last week called Save Oak Flat from Foreign Mining. And so there's a legislative solution also. So this fight is not over.
I think one thing with the series we always try to do is we try to sort of give people ways that they can have an impact. What do we do right now? Because it does, I think sometimes it feels like we don't have a lot of, once it gets into the courts, like regular people don't have a lot of say in something like this.
Well, now that there's a bill in Congress, you can call up and write your representatives and tell them, look, there's this bill moving through, and I really want you to support this because I really think that this is a bad idea. If you're American, you can connect with this because you don't want to see the copper resources that we own just being sent off to a foreign company. And then, of course, just talking to your friends and your family and be like, did you know that we're doing this thing? And getting people fired up. And I think the third thing is go out there as climbers, and not everyone's into the sharp bouldering and the climbing on volcanic tuff, but go out there and climb and take pictures and share your story. tell people about how awesome this place is. And those are the sorts of things that we can do right now to sort of help share information and provide some perspective to what's going on with this issue.
Thanks, Eric, for joining us today, and thanks to the Access Fund for working on this issue. We put a link to the bill in the show notes, as well as info on how to reach out to your representatives. Thanks to Diaries Plus members. Your support makes this kind of reporting possible. Thank you.